Hello and Friday greetings from us. This is Suzanne DeWitt Hall and Declan DeWitt Hall from Where True Love Is doing our Friday check-in. So how are you this week?
I'm good.
Tell them how you are.
I'm great. How are you?
That's such a good answer. I'm doing reasonably well too. I'm feeling a little bit fragile this afternoon, to tell you the truth. We haven't even talked about that. But yeah, so what are we talking about today?
Well, I thought today would be a good day to talk about change. I've seen a lot of people talking about changes they're going through and how change affects them. So I just thought we'd talk back and forth a little bit about change and ask them to share their thoughts.
That's a good idea, to hear how, I think a lot of people are not very comfortable with it. How comfortable are you with change generally?
Generally, I'm pretty comfortable unless it's diet. There's certain things that I don't like. I don't like the diet thing. There's certain kinds of change I don't like. But I think maybe because of my age and experience, I've realized that change is inevitable.
That makes sense.
So I kind of flow with it.
Yeah. I think I'm pretty blessed because I'm the type of person who doesn't really mind change for the most part. I mean, there's always obviously, bad things that happen in life you're not going to be crazy about, but I think I've always been somebody who's looking for how to improve things, trying to make, in the corporate world we used to call it continuous improvement, but just trying to kind of keep ramping things up. But so luckily I think I'm reasonably good at it. Yeah, thank goodness, because life is all about change.
It is. It's always happening, isn't it?
Yes. Why do you think people have trouble with change?
I think a lot of people have trouble with change because of their history. There's been certain changes in their life that have made them uncomfortable. I think that's how a lot of us associate our feelings about change based on history and things that have happened in our lives. Like if I moved and I had a terrible move, I hate moving.
Oh, interesting.
Certain changes, that mentality about that change develops from your history.
Yeah. I was thinking about it like just evolutionarily as a coping, as a skill for continuing the species, because like let's say you're living in a place where there's water, there's shelter and all the things that you need, relatively few enemies, then changing out of that would put you at a distinct disadvantage. So I would think that it's probably coded in a little bit that if you've got something that's working, that change makes you nervous.
I think so. I think you're right.
You were saying that some things are harder for you, like dieting.
Dieting is harder.
Changing diet.
That's one of the top ones. I think, when I was probably about 12 years ago, 15, maybe 15, it was a little bit before you, I had a lot of anxiety. And anxiety seems to make change more difficult to deal with.
Probably because of the unknown.
Yeah, the unknown factor and all of that. And I think that I had to figure out ways to deal with that. And I think we're going to talk about that in another question about how to deal with it. But I think anxiety leads to small changes even being difficult. Like going to a different grocery store, or, going to a different movie theater, going to a different church, going to a different Bible study, going to something different when you have anxiety. Those changes are very difficult.
That makes sense. Yeah. And
what about you?
I was just thinking, because like I said, of my feelings of fragility today, I think that for most part I'm cool with change, except if it's related to my perception of myself. Like in this situation, we're changing something pretty significant professionally, and I think it's the right move. We'll talk more about that when it's a little bit more formalized. But it's this thing has had an impact on how I viewed myself in a professional capacity, and shifting away from it is making me feel vulnerable. So it's interesting to find that I feel intellectually very okay with our decision, and yet emotionally I'm feeling a little weird about it. So I can talk all I want about being fine with change, and yet here we are.
Well, then I think there's another one. I think that if the change presents something that's unknown, there's fear.
Yeah.
And so then there's a fear about the change, and until it starts to develop, you have to deal with that fear.
Yeah, and I think especially for things that you can't control, there's a lot of the changes that are within our control seem a little bit less scary than the changes that are are not, that are kind of coming from the outside.
Right. Well, it's inevitable.
Change is inevitable, and it's often good.
Well, I like to talk about the good changes too. Like the changes that I enjoy are the seasons. I think every time we switch from fall or to spring, there's joy in that. So those changes bring me joy.
Yeah.
What do you think? What kind of
You
changes
used
do
to
you like?
love like shuffling around furniture, and I never understood that, and I'm starting to get it a little bit more because in this house we've had different rooms be so many different functions since we moved in 5 years ago.
That's true. That's true, and I think there was this. I think that was one of the things that helped me deal with change, because I was in a life that I never knew what was going to happen next due to my relationship with my ex-spouse. So if I controlled the change in little tiny ways, like I moved the furniture around, I learned to develop an excitement about change, which I probably thought was going to help me with the bigger changes that were inevitable.
Interesting. And isn't it interesting how much of that goes, happens subconsciously? We don't even really know what's happening until we look backwards and say, that was probably a coping mechanism.
Right. I mean, I'm in my late 50s. We're in our 50s, so we've been through a lot of changes in our life.
And they're still underway.
They are underway.
Just like for you guys, I'm sure. We saw a really cool change mentioned. A friend shared a blog post from a transgender woman who had been reading Transfigured and had this, she'd really pulled away from faith pretty much entirely because of the reception she'd gotten related to her sexual orientation. And this friend gave her a copy of Transfigured, and she's kind of been, her view on things and on God has been transformed, and that was something I really need to read today. So we thank you for when you send us feedback like that about how what we try to do here changes things.
I think encouragement, when you encourage someone who's going through a change, and that helps them walk through that change. And I think like today you needed that.
I did. It was perfect timing.
It was perfect timing.
Holy Spirit urging people to do things like speak up.
Yeah, I would encourage you, if you have trouble with changes, to try small things. I mean, there are some people who just are stuck and they don't like change at all, and they don't enter into the change. Go to a different place to eat that you've never been to before. Try little small things, unique clothes, a different haircut. This is a safe time because of the pandemic. You can shave it all off and it grows back.
Haircuts can be very fear-inducing.
Try new foods. Try a different genre that you normally read something else. Try these little tiny things. Little steps can help you. I think, well, they have me get through the bigger changes in life.
Yeah, and for the bigger ones, so we were talking about how maybe to cope a little better with the difficulty of change when it is hard is focusing on the things that you can control. This is kind of a common message for a lot of the problems that people face.
So.
I think focusing on what you can control and managing that, and because the unknown is often a big part of where the fear comes from and the discomfort, practicing a little bit in your mind, even how you'll handle things or how you might face different scenarios that could come up in this new situation of change.
Yeah, I've been to a lot of therapists. So one of the therapists I went to told me to focus inwardly and just sit there and figure out for myself why I'm afraid of the change and what could happen through the change. So it's almost like walking through that change, but you're doing it inwardly. So that helps you prepare for it.
That's a good one.
Yeah. I think thinking about it relieves that anxiety for me. Like if there's going to be a big change, to think about it. Like I'm scared about this thing that we're going through that we're not sharing.
Right.
Because it'll be a little bit different, and it's something different for me, and it's a big responsibility, I feel. So there's a little bit of fear there about that change. And so now I'm thinking about how will I deal with that? How will I process that? And how's the best way to walk forward? Yeah. And there's certain things that alleviate it. If you're prepared for things, it alleviates some of that stress and anxiety. And I think that fear and anxiety is what hurts you.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you almost always are.
Almost always.
We like it when we're both right at the same time.
That happens a lot. I like that.
Luckily. So we better wrap up.
Well, I want to share a quote with you, and I don't know who said it. I looked for who said it, but I don't know. And the quote is, if you do not create change, change will create you. But I want to change it.
Interesting.
I want to change it just a little bit.
Okay.
I want to change it to, if you do not embrace change, change will control you.
Yeah.
Because then there's the fear and anxiety that comes into that. So work with it. Tell us what you think. Tell us what changes you're going through and how you're dealing with them. Give us some ideas, maybe some quotes to help other people, because I'm sure a lot of you are going through changes in your life. And let's see how we can do this all together. Let's walk through these changes.
Yeah, and Jody just asked about chronic anxiety and someone whose spouse doesn't accept the reality of it. And so if anyone has some thoughts on that, you might have some thoughts you can write down in the comments. Please do, because that sounds like a significant one, Jody, and we'll lift some prayers for you.
I had a lot of anxiety, so I'll share a lot of links and suggestions for what you can do. That's a big one. We could cover that for probably a half an hour, so it's probably best that I leave you some links. We will pray for you.
Yes.
I know that's a tough one. Anxiety is hard to deal with. I dealt with it for years.
A lot of people in your family.
Yeah, a lot of my people in my family do. So we'll share some stuff for you, Jody, and we will lift you in prayer. So here we are Friday. We're talking about change, and we hope you share your thoughts. And we'll share some more stuff about that after we get off. And we hope that you have a great weekend and a great week ahead. You want to close us up?
Yes. We will see you again. We love you. And take good care. And pray for us for this change that we're kind of walking through, okay? We appreciate it.
See you next week.